Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. I welcome everyone to His Holiness Candramauli Swami Maharaj's daily class. Thank you all for joining. My humble obeisances to you all. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today Maharaj is not available, so we have Her Grace Gopika Radhika Mataji to enlighten us on this topic of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 12th chapter, verse number 13. Hare Krishna Mataji, my humble obeisances to you all, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for your time and association. You can please take over, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
I made you co-host, Mataji. You can share your screen.
And first, I'm sorry, I didn't. I'll open Vedabase first, whatever it is. So, yes, today we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 12, verse 30. Tasya prita mana raja viprair dhaumya kripadibhe jatakam karayamasa vachayitva cha mangalam. Translation: King Yudhishthir, who was very satisfied with the birth of Maharaj Parikshit, had the purificatory process of birth performed. Learned Brahmanas headed by Dhaumya and Kripa recited auspicious hymns. Purport: There is a need for a good and intelligent class of Brahmanas who are expert in performing the purificatory processes prescribed in the system of Varnashram Dharma. Unless such purificatory processes are performed, there is no possibility of good population. And in the age of Kali, the population all over the world is of Shudra quality or lower for want of this purificatory process. It is not possible, however, to revive the Vedic process of purification in this age for want of proper facilities and good Brahmanas. But there is the Pancharatrika system also recommended for this age. The Pancharatrika system acts on the Shudra class of men, supposedly the population of the Kali Yuga, and it is the prescribed purificatory process suitable to the age and time. Such a purificatory process is allowed only for spiritual upliftment and not for any other purpose. Spiritual upliftment is never conditioned by higher or lower parentage. After the Garbhadan purificatory process, there are certain other sanskaras like Simantonayan, Sadabhakshanam, etc. during the period of pregnancy. And when the child is born, the first purificatory process is Jat Karma. This was performed duly by Maharaj Yudhishthir with the help of good and learned Brahmanas like Dhaumya, the royal priest, and Kripacharya, who was not only a priest but also a great general. Both these learned and perfect priests, assisted by other good Brahmanas, were employed by Maharaj Yudhishthir to perform the ceremony. Therefore, all the sanskaras, purificatory processes, are not mere formalities or social functions only, but they are all for practical purposes and can be successfully performed by expert Brahmanas like Dhaumya and Kripa. Such Brahmanas are not only rare, but also not available in this age, and therefore, for the purpose of spiritual upliftment in this fallen age, the Goswamis prefer the purificatory processes under Pancharatrika formulas to the Vedic rites. Kripacharya is the son of the great Rishi Sardaban and was born in the family of Gautam. The birth is said to be accidental. By chance, the great Rishi Sardaban met Janpadi, a famous society girl of heaven, and the Rishi Sardaban discharged semen in two parts. By one part, immediately a male child, and by the other part, a female child were born as twins. The male child was later on known as Kripa, and the female child was known as Kripi. Maharaj Shantanu, while engaged in chase in the jungle, picked up the children and brought them up to the Brahminical status by the proper purificatory process. Kripacharya later became a great general like Dronacharya, and his sister was married to Dronacharya. So that is, Kripi was the mother of Ashwatthama. Kripacharya later on took part in the Battle of Kurukshetra and joined the party of Duryodhana. Kripacharya helped kill Abhimanyu, the father of Maharaj Parikshit, but he was still held in esteem by the family of the Pandavas due to his being as great a Brahmin as Dronacharya. When the Pandavas were sent to the forest after being defeated in the gambling game with Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra entrusted the Pandavas to Kripacharya for guidance. After the end of the battle, Kripacharya again became a member of the royal assembly, and he was called during the birth of Maharaj Parikshit for recitation of auspicious Vedic hymns to make the ceremony successful. Maharaj Yudhishthir, while quitting the palace for his great departure to the Himalayas, entrusted Kripacharya with Maharaj Parikshit as his disciple, and he left home satisfied because of Kripacharya's taking charge of Maharaj Parikshit. The great administrators, kings, and emperors were always under the guidance of learned Brahmanas like Kripacharya, and thus were able to act properly in the discharge of political responsibility. So yeah, just reading the translation once more. King Yudhishthir, who was very satisfied with the birth of Maharaj Parikshit, had the purificatory process of birth performed. Learned Brahmanas headed by Dhaumya and Kripa recited auspicious hymns. Om Agyantimirandhasya Dhyananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Charine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyashta Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'll switch my slides. Okay. Right. So I basically thought to explore today's verse and purport under these 4 titles, which is, and they're very much interrelated, which is the role of Brahmanas in society, then the significance of sanskaras, the Pancharatrika system, and of course, our Sankirtan Yajna. So yeah, they're very much interrelated, all 4 of these topics. So if you look at the first point, which is the role of Brahmanas in society, Prabhupada makes some very important points in today's purport regarding the role of Brahmanas in society, how King Yudhishthir had all these learned Brahmanas like Dhaumya and Kripacharya perform the purificatory processes for Maharaj Parikshit now that he's born. And not just that, Prabhupada traces the entire trajectory of the role of Brahmanas. For example, he says that in the case of Kripacharya, he was entrusted with the Pandavas for guiding them when the Pandavas were defeated in the gambling match. Then at the end of the battle, he again became a member of the royal assembly. Then he is the one who performs the birth ceremony of Parikshit Maharaj. And then even when Maharaj Yudhishthir, he embarks on his final journey to the Himalayas, it is to Kripacharya that Maharaj Parikshit is entrusted with for guiding him and directing him in governing the kingdom after the Pandavas' departure from this planet. So as Prabhupada makes the point here that the great administrators, kings, and emperors, they were always under the guidance of learned Brahmanas like Kripacharya. And thus they were able to act properly in the discharge of political responsibilities. So this is just a very interesting point that I thought to discuss, because this is something which is, again, it's one of the unique gifts of Vedic civilization that we get to know about. And it is, in one sense, relatively uncommon, relatively unheard of, almost non-existent in our society today. that there can be a class of people like the Brahmanas in society who, firstly, okay, we'll explore this one by one. First of all, if we look at it, role of Brahmanas. So who are the Brahmanas? What is a Brahman? So at a very basic level, of course, we know the definition from Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Chaturvarnya Maya Srishtam Gunakarma Vibhagasha. So according to the three modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the four divisions of human society are created by me. So this is, in one sense, the very basic definition of the four varnas and four ashrams that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita. So this is very clear from this definition that Brahman is not someone who is designated as a Brahman by birth. A person who is born in a Brahman family or a Brahman caste, that is not what makes one a Brahman. It is guna and karma. So guna means quality and karma means activity. So these are the two parameters which define what particular varna and what particular ashram a person is supposed to be situated in. So a Brahman is someone who is a Brahman by quality and by activity. As Prabhupada elaborates in this purport, Srimad Bhagavatam 10.8.6, that no one is born a Brahman. Everyone is born a Shudra. But by the guidance of a Brahman and by sanskara, one can become Dvija, twice born, and then gradually become a Brahman. And Brahmanism is not a system meant to create a monopoly for a particular class of men. Everyone should be educated so as to become a Brahman. At least there must be an opportunity to allow everyone to attain the destination of life. So this is the very basic, the first thing that we come to know about a Brahman, that no one is born a Brahman. This is actually from a Sanskrit shloka. It says that Janmana Jayate Shudra Sanskarat Bhaved Dvija. So as Prabhupada is saying, everyone is born a Shudra, Janmana Jayate Shudra. And by sanskara, then one becomes Dvija. One becomes, Dvija is the preliminary state of a Brahman. And then one becomes further advanced. The fourth stage of a Dvija is that of a Brahman. One who Brahma Janati Brahmana, one who has knowledge of the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Absolute. That is a Brahman. So it is not, as Prabhupada says, they are meant to create a monopoly for a particular class of men, as sometimes this thing has been misused in contemporary society, in recent history, recent past, where the title of Brahmanism was often misused to exploit other classes of people, but that was not the case. And actually the proof of that, in one sense, we get a very sound proof of this thing, that Brahman was not by birth, but rather by quality. And the proof is that there is a term called Brahma Bandhu, which exists in our Vedic scriptures. For example, we see that Ashwatthama is referred to as a Brahma Bandhu or a Dvija Bandhu. Similarly, we also hear the term Kshatriya Bandhu in our Vedic scriptures. So Brahma Bandhu and Kshatriya Bandhu, they used to denote people who are, Brahma Bandhu literally means a friend of a Brahman or the son of a Brahman. So the purpose of this term was to distinguish between a Brahman and one who is merely the son of a Brahman or the friend of a Brahman or someone who is born in a Brahman family. Which means, yes, he is born in a Brahman family, but he himself is not a Brahman. So the very existence of this term, Brahma Bandhu, actually proves the fact that the Vedic civilization was not a system of caste by birth. There was a distinction between one who is actually a Brahman, a real Brahman, and one who is a Brahman just by dint of his birth or just by dint of association, familial connection. And that is why Ashwatthama, because yes, he was Dronacharya's son, so by birth he was a Brahman, but by activity he was not a Brahman. He did not act like a Brahman. For example, his cowardly act of killing the 5 sons of the Pandavas when they were sleeping. So that disqualified him from being called an actual Brahman. So he was referred to as Brahma Bandhu. He's just the son of a Brahman. He's the friend of a Brahman. He's not a real Brahman. And similarly, we have Kshatriya Bandhu, the friend of a Kshatriya. Someone who, yes, he is born in the family of Kshatriyas, but he does not display the character and the qualities of a Kshatriya. So there will be a difference between a Kshatriya and a Kshatriya Bandhu. So yeah, this is one very important, very basic point with regards to Brahmanas, and something which is very, very much misunderstood, misapplied, often unfairly criticized regarding the Vedic scriptures that there is caste by birth. No, there is no such thing as caste by birth in the Vedic scriptures. There is only guna and karma, which is perfectly a reasonable way of categorizing people. Just like Prabhupada would make the point, right, that if someone is born in a family of doctors or someone is born in a family of lawyers, so that person, just by being born in a family of doctors, does not mean that that person himself becomes a doctor. No, that person himself or herself has to undergo medical school, the entire procedure for becoming a doctor themselves, and only then will they be qualified to be called a doctor themselves. So, but yes, by being born in a family of doctors, they have a higher chance of being a doctor. There is greater likelihood that they will also become a doctor, but it is not guaranteed. Just by being born to a doctor does not make one a doctor. And same is the case with Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, just anyone in the Varnashram system. And so what was the role then that this class of people played in the society? And that we find here. So these were the, Krishna describes the Brahmanas in terms of the qualities that they displayed, which is Bhagavad Gita 18:42. Krishna says, Shamodamas tapah shaucham kshantirarjavamevacha jnanam vijnanam astikyam brahma karma svabhavajam. Peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which the Brahmanas were. So this basically, Brahmanas were a section of society who basically embodied all these godly qualities, all these qualities of literally the demigods, of peacefulness, of self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty. Like Prabhupada would often say, right? Austerity was the wealth. Austerity is the wealth of a Brahman. Just like a Kshatriya, his wealth is how much kingdom, how much empire, how much land he has conquered, and how much tax he is able to collect. For a Brahman, his wealth or his opulence was how much austerity he performs, and his purity, his tolerance, his honesty, knowledge, wisdom, religiousness. So this was basically like a section of the society which is imbued with all these purest of qualities, most godlike qualities, qualities of demig. Society had this class of people to turn to for guidance. The Brahmanas were sought after for guidance by the common citizens as well as by the royalty. The Brahmanas were not the rulers, but they were the topmost people in the society because they used to be the teachers of the rulers. They were not the kings, but they were the gurus of the kings. So a position which was higher than the king itself. And in terms of the activities, so this was a glimpse of the qualities that the Brahmanas displayed. And in terms of the activities, Prabhupada says here in this lecture that Patan, Patan, Yajan, Yajan, and Dan Pratigraha. So these are basically the 6 activities that Brahmanas would perform. So the first is Patan Patan. A Brahman must be a very learned scholar, Patan, which means he studies the scriptures, and he shall also make others good scholars. So Patan means teaching. The Brahman is the teacher. Then he must be a good worshipper of the Supreme Lord, and he must teach others how to become Brahman, how to worship. Yajan and Yajan. So Yajan means one who worships himself, and Yajan means one who conducts religious ceremonies or helps others to perform deity worship. And then there's Dan and Pratigraha. At least in India, Prabhupada is saying the Brahmin Vaishnavas, they are given charities without any hesitation. And a Brahmin, as soon as there is excess money, he would immediately spend it for Krishna. So Dan and Pratigraha. He'll make charity, he'll distribute prasadam. He'll not keep money for future. No, Dan, Pratigraha. So Dan means accepting charity, and Pratigraha means giving charity. So these were basically the 6 occupational duties of a Brahmin. They would teach, they would learn and teach, perform deity worship, yagyas, etc., and do these things for others, and accept charity and give charity. As Prabhupada said, because they would never accumulate anything. A Brahmin never keeps a stock of anything. Whatever they get, whatever they need for immediate use, they keep that, and the rest they would give away in charity. And that resulted basically in a section of society which was like completely selfless. Because as we can see here, I mean, we know in today's society, for example, education, it's basically, it's a commercial enterprise. Like, just to put it bluntly, yes, it's a commercial enterprise. We need money to get educated. People need money to get their children educated. And depending on the amount of money one has, that dictates the level or quality of education that one is going to get, and the quality of school or college or university that one is going to get into. The less money you have, the lower quality that you get in terms of at least the societal hierarchy. Whereas here we find that Patan, the Brahmanas, they were the ones who were in charge of educating the society, both the common citizens, the royalty, the kings, everyone from top to bottom. The education was given by the Brahmanas, and Brahmanas were people who did not accept salary. They just existed on whatever people gave them in charity out of their own accord. So literally, we have the highest kind of education. The highest kind of education was available indiscriminately to everyone in society, based on this principle of a Brahmin performing this role. So yeah, like it was a very, very incredible system where we had a section of society which is like basically out of this whole cycle of economic well-being directing the kind of hierarchy that there is in society. Brahmanas are someone who are not involved in economic endeavors. They don't do activities to make money. They perform all their services free of cost. They provide guidance. They teach others free of cost. And because of that selfless role that they would perform, they were accorded the highest status in society. So yeah, it's basically, in one sense, this whole concept is quite alien and unheard of in today's society, where status is determined by money, the level of education is determined by money, basically everything. Who gets to have the highest say in public affairs, who gets to dictate what will happen at the level of society or country, everything is determined by one who has the most money. The one who has the most money gets to pull the string. Whereas here, it was the purity and the level of purity, the level of austerity, the level of scholarship, which determined who would have the highest say, who would be the person who will be respected the most. So that was basically the Vedic concept of civilization, the Vedic concept of hierarchy. That respect was given in terms of who is the most scholarly, who is the most religious, who is the most pious, who is the most austere and truthful and tolerant and selfless, rather than one who is the most rich or who has the most control over people. And that is the beauty of Vedic civilization. And as we see here, for example, this is one very striking example of the Brahmana's level of detachment and selflessness. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam 1:12-34. This is when Maharaj Yudhishthir, he's contemplating performing the Ashwamedha sacrifice. And such sacrifices were very costly. And so he needed Lakshmi to perform those sacrifices. And so here it is written, Maharaj Yudhishthir had to collect heaps of gold left by Maharaj Marutta and the Brahmanas who had been given gold in charity by King Marutta. The learned Brahmanas could not take away all the loads of gold given by Maharaj Marutta, and therefore they left behind the major portion of the gift. And Maharaj Marutta also did not again collect such heaps of gold given away in charity. Besides that, all the golden plates and utensils which were used in the sacrifice were also thrown in the dustbins, and all such heaps of gold remained unclaimed property for a long time, till Maharaj Yudhishthir collected them. So a very striking example of the level of detachment displayed by Brahmanas in those times. That yes, they were truly qualified to get charity because they were so detached. Like in this case, there was this King Marutta who performed sacrifices and he gave away heaps of gold in charity to the Brahmanas. And the Brahmanas, they were so detached, they just basically took whatever little they needed and they discarded everything else. And it was just lying there for years and years, centuries, just as unclaimed property. And Krishna, he guides Maharaj Yudhishthir to just go and collect it to perform this Ashwamedha sacrifice for the benefit of this kingdom, because that was just lying there. I mean, it was the Brahmanas' property. They were given that property by the king, but yeah, they didn't need it. So they did take They only took what they needed to maintain body and soul together. Everything else was just left. Whoever wants, they can take it. So that was the level of detachment. And therefore, they were Brahmanas were truly, they were worthy recipients of charity because they were not greedy. Similarly, yeah, and that was why Prabhupada would often point out this famous phrase that Prabhupada often used, that a society without Brahmanas is like a headless society, because in the Virat Purush, Krishna's universal form, the Brahmanas represent the head of the Virat root, and the Kshatriyas represent the arm, the Vaishyas represent the belly, and the Shudras represent the legs. So all four are required for proper functioning of the society. But what is notable about today's society is that there is a striking absence of such a class of people who are so selfless and so scholarly and so religious, so pure in their activities and their attitude. And therefore, Prabhupada, like he says in this particular lecture, so there is derangement of the social order in the present day world. Why? Because there is no head. Any society where there is no intellectual persons or Krishna consciousness, that is a rascal society because there is no head. Either it is madman or a headless man or a dead body. If brain is not working properly, then he is a madman. And if there is no head at all, then he is a dead man. So do you think in a dead society or in a mad society, there can be any peace? Prabhupada is saying, no, society is already dead. What do you mean by peace? And if the society is all full of madmen, then where's the question of peace? So yeah, very significant point that society, as Prabhupada used to very often emphasize this, it needs at least a section of people who have that level of selflessness and scholarship and purity. And because that then uplifts the entire society. For example, another striking example of the Brahmana's selflessness that comes to mind is King Drupad, because he felt insulted by Dronacharya. So he performed this yagya with the wish to have a son who would kill Dronacharya. And Drishtadyumna is born from that fire sacrifice. So Drishtadyumna, he was predestined to kill Dronacharya. I mean, that was the reason he was born. That was the benediction that King Drupad got. And Dronacharya knew this. But still, when Drishtadyumna goes to Dronacharya to become a student in the military arts, Dronacharya agrees. I mean, he could have refused. He knows that this person is going to learn the art of weapons from me, and he's going to use that to kill me in the end. I'm destined to be killed by this person. And still, Dronacharya did not refuse to teach Drishtadyumna. Similarly, we see, like, for example, we have the example of Krishna and Sudama. We see that both of them were attending the same school, right? They were both in Sandipani Muni's ashram, which is also so significant. Like, again, it's not the kind of situation we have today where the richest people go to the most elite universities, and those who are kind of mediocre, they go to mediocre schools and colleges. Those who are really poor, they don't go anywhere at all, or they just go to some, really, really poor class facilities. No, here we have Krishna, who is Dwarkadhish. He is studying in the same school as Sudama, the poor Brahmin. Both of them, as students, they both had the same facility, the same opportunity to acquire knowledge and wisdom and education. So that was the liberal quality of the Brahmanas, as we see in the case of Sandipani Muni or in the case of Dronacharya. Anyone who is willing, who is sincere, the price to pay was one's sincerity, one's devotion to one's guru. And if the student is willing and sincere, then education was there. No Brahmin would refuse to teach a willing student. So yeah, that was the kind of class of people that Prabhupada points out, intellectual persons or Krishna conscious people, devotees, Brahmanas, that is needed to have a head in the society. Otherwise, as Prabhupada says here, it's either a dead society or a mad society. And therefore, then there are chaos in the society. Also, like we mentioned before, this is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 12, where it mentions the symptoms of Kali Yoga, and it says here that a person will be judged unholy if he does not have money. So yeah, that is the case, right, in today's society. The Vedic civilization is the only example of a society where we see that, yes, money is not everything. The people who are the topmost in the society are the people who don't have money. They live on other people's charity. So the criteria for being respected was something else than money. The very unique quality of the Vedic society and Vedic values in general. And then if you move on to the significance of sanskaras, so performing the sanskaras, like we saw yajan, the brahmanas, they would perform deity worship, conduct religious ceremonies, yagyas, sanskaras. So these were all some of the very important functions that brahmanas performed for the society. And why sanskaras were particularly relevant, as Prabhupada points out in today's purport, that sanskaras were not just social functions, they had a practical purpose. And that practical purpose was, as Prabhupada writes in this particular purport, the sanskaras of the school of Sanatana Dharma are highly suitable for creating an atmosphere for taking advantage of good stellar influences. And therefore, the Garbhadan sanskar, or the first seedling purificatory process prescribed for the higher castes, is the beginning of all pious acts for receiving a good, pious, and intelligent class of men in human society. There will be peace and prosperity in the world due to good and sane population only. So the sanskaras, they were not just social functions where people would just gather as a matter of formality, but they were basically a scientific procedure to harness good astrological combinations and take advantage of those auspicious influences, auspicious vibrations created by favorable astrological influences. And in that, so begin activities during those auspicious times, begin milestones, begin landmark events in life during those auspicious times, so that the entire process would be auspicious. For example, like there is this Vidyarambha Sanskar, which is when a child starts one's education, begins to write the first letter, or the Annaprashan Sanskar, right? When the child is given his first solid food. There's the Upanayan Sanskar, when the sacred ceremony is conducted, all the way until a person dies, which is the Anteshti Sanskar. So all these sanskaras, they used to be performed under taking into consideration these good stellar influences, good astrological influences, and begin those important activities during those times, so that the auspicious influence will last throughout the entire life, through all these important activities and stages of life. And in that way, this was one of the key ways in which the Vedic society ensured that there would always be peace and prosperity and good population in the world. And we see this, for example, in the case of Nanda Maharaj, because Krishna, he was the son of, he enacted the pastime of taking birth as the son of Devaki and then being brought to Vrindavan. And his name-giving ceremony had not been performed. And then when Garg Muni, in 10th canto, we read this, right? When Garg Muni, he visits Vrindavan because he is sent by Vasudev to Nanda Maharaj to perform Krishna's name-giving ceremony. And Nanda Maharaj, as soon as he sees Garg Muni, he requests him that, please, I have these two boys, Krishna and Balaram. Would you please perform their name-giving ceremony, the name-giving samskar? And Garg Muni, he says that there is a danger associated with this. He says Kansa is a great diplomat and a very simple man. And, Yogmaya, the daughter of Devaki, she had already informed Kansa that the 8th child was already born somewhere else. And so Garg Muni, he says here, Kansa, upon hearing that the purificatory process has been performed by me, the priest of the Yadu dynasty, may certainly consider all these points and suspect that Krishna is the son of Devaki and Vasudev, then he might take steps to kill Krishna, and that would be a catastrophe. So Garg Muni is saying there is a danger if I perform Krishna's name-giving ceremony. But then we see here, Nand Maharaj says, my dear great sage, if you think that you're performing this process of purification will make Kansa suspicious, then secretly chant the Vedic hymns and perform the purifying process of second birth here in the cowshed of my house, without the knowledge of anyone else, even my relatives. For this process of purification is essential. So he was not deterred by the external obstacles. He was like, okay, no problem. We won't do a gorgeous, opulent ceremony. Just, we'll just do it secretly in a cow barn. But please do it because That's how important it is. That's how important it was in Vedic society. Prabhupada writes in the purport, Nand Maharaj did not like the idea of avoiding the purificatory process. Despite the many obstacles, he wanted to take advantage of Garg Muni's presence and do what was needed. Without these activities of purification, the society would be considered a society of animals. To take advantage of Garg Muni's presence, Nand Maharaj wanted to perform the Namkaran ceremonies, even secretly, without any gorgeous arrangements. Therefore, the opportunity for purification should be regarded as the essential duty of human society. And of course, that leads us basically to how the sanskaras are to be performed in today's day and age. Because yes, today the situation is very, very different from what it was during Krishna's time 5,000 years ago. And that leads us to the Pancharatrika system and Sankirtan Yajna. So as Prabhupada emphasizes in today's purport also that he says here that the Pancharatrika system is recommended for this age. The Pancharatrika system acts on the Shudra class of men, supposedly the population of Kali Yuga. And it is the prescribed purificatory process suitable to the age and time. So, of course, as we know, like here Prabhupada says in the lecture, with regards to Vedic yajnas, it requires large amount of wealth to perform such yajnas. Nowadays, people are suffering for want of sufficient food grains, right? I mean, people don't even have food to eat themselves. What to speak of offering oblations of food grains in the fire. And in the yajna, as Prabhupada is saying, tons and thousands of mounds of food grains are offered in the fire. But there's no food grains, there is no ghee. Therefore, yajna is not possible. It happened during Prabhupada's time. Prabhupada was about place. I'll need to look it up again. But it was a very new temple. The opulent arrangements, they were still struggling for funds because they had just started and just a few devotees were there. And so they had just somehow with difficulty managed to acquire a little ghee for the fire sacrifice. And then as soon as Prabhupada was about to start the sacrifice, the devotee who was bringing the ball of ghee from the kitchen to the yajna, to the place where the yajna was about to be performed,